so good afternoon everyone. First of all, I would like to inform you that unfortunately Mr. Badstas had to cancel in the last minute cancellation because of a sudden death in his family. But we will do our best to make this conference very interesting, I'm sure it will be, and that you will enjoy it as much as you can. So, EPN would like to thank you for being here. So tonight, as you know, with the European elections coming up, everyone's wondering which political movement is going to take the lead, especially now that we have two different European groups, which are pro-Europeans and Eurosceptics. And so tonight we are very honored to receive Ms Saskia Brickmont, who is head of the political department of Namur, Ecolo Namur, and as well as Mr. Serdar Yesilyurt, director of the EU representation of the Turkish Federation of Businessmen and Industrialists. So they're going to answer, give us their vision of Europe and answer a crucial question, which is, in this current context, is it possible to develop a green and social Europe? So thank you very much for being here. It will be followed by a cocktail afterwards, and we hope that you will enjoy the conference.
Thank you very much for these nice words of introduction. As it has been put forward very nicely, we are missing a speaker on our panel. But we have decided to cover up the issues which Mr. Stas was expected to cover up. So, in order to have an introduction on green Europe, green economy in Europe, I would like to bring you back 2 centuries ago. Indeed, if you look at the history in Europe, we start with the Industrial Revolution, which brings us to a new era in history. And the model was suddenly built upon an understanding that consumption is the key thing to the happiness. So it was quite right that time because there was a big scarcity of everything, and the Industrial Revolution has suddenly brought everything much easier to every individual. And if you look at the liberal theories that all our capitalist economy is now based on, it was proper and quite efficient to make people ask for more consumption, so that in order to consume they need to produce, which brings efficiency. They work more and more efficiently, they produce more, and if they can produce more, they can consume more. So this is the basic understanding of the world we are living in. It was properly done because what we see in now as consequences is that the last 2 centuries growth and development in the knowledge, science and technology is great. I mean, the success, it's a big success story, so there is a huge efficiency. But I think when it comes to the modeling of this era, there were 2 small deficiencies in this model. I say small because it may seem small, but now we see the consequences of it. First one is that this theory, you consume as much as you can, and then the others will try to produce as much, has a basic understanding that we have limitless resources. So normally it's an open-ended model, and the open-ended model is basically based on a limitless resource. But we know that we are living on a small planet, and in terms of energy, in terms of the metals we have that we use for production is limited. And after 2 centuries, now we are very hardly finding iron, which we know that is not an earthly thing, which comes with the satellites which hit the ground several 100,000 years ago. And so that we have started to learn how to recycle them. But the mentality hasn't changed. Even though we are already at an empty can on some of the minerals that we have, we are still trying to survive the system that we have created. So this big deficiency, we are thinking of a limitless resources, we are just trying to cover it up with just changing the material used or trying to recycle, but not thinking of totally changing this consumption mentality. And the second one, the second deficiency, which may seem small at first sight, is that we have thought that it is an open system too. So whatever we produce, that will be waste, we just throw it away, but to where? And we learned to get energy from hydrocarbons. We burnt them, they have become very useful source of energy, and there was some smoke coming out of it, and it was just disappearing in the air. So it's easy, so it's disappearing, you don't see that. But 200 centuries learned us one thing, that they do not disappear, because we are living indeed in a closed system. So nothing gets out of the world unless we send it to satellite, and now people are talking about throwing some dirt to the space too. I mean, there are such things, but I mean, there are not proper discussions even, if you ask me. But it's a closed system, so every dirt we have created in the last 2 centuries is now the things that we are already living in. Europe has understood it much before the other countries, because Europe had started to create all this mass in the environment much before with the Industrial Revolution than the other countries. That's why there's a big awareness now in Europe, but less awareness in the other parts of the world. But of course, while criticizing this consumption-based model, I think the questions to be asked is that, can we really change this model? Are we really ready to take the to face with the consequences of this model? Because if we really get off this consumption-based thing, the first question we should ask is, do we need this many shoes? Do we need this many shirts? Because just 50 years ago, people were just having 2 suits, even the politicians, 3 of them at most, and let's say 4 or 5 shirts, and they were just washing them and wearing them. And so if you want to have a new suit, it would take something like 3 weeks, because a tailor would make it for you, and possibly offer the cotton used from somewhere, and which would come from far away. But with just the new era, I mean, just go and buy, and you don't even think where it comes from. It's not just for the cloth, it's just the same for the food. I mean, I'm sure that many of our fathers do not know anything like ananas or mango. They just met it some 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when all these fruits started to fly into Europe. So are we really ready to get rid of our luxuries in order to save our children, in order to change this model of consumption, is a question to be met now. And I think this question is for all of us at individual level, because everything can be changed at individual level. And if you don't change it at our individual level, we cannot change it on world level too. So it's a mental change, and it needs to be addressed. And I personally think we do not need, I have many of them. Of course, I'm very much carrying out how people think of me. But I'm sure if we all agree, at least a part of the society can agree that we don't need them all. And we can just be more on the savings side. And savings is not a financial terminology, it is the life terminology. We can save more water, we can save more shirts, we can save more tires, we can save more chemicals, we can use less of them. And this brings down all these big transportation in the world. So if we say that, okay, we can have grapefruits of lemon and orange instead of ananas, if you take this decision, so we don't need all these big planes flying from, let's say, Uganda to Belgium, and we save energy, time, and we can just bring the energy, the total production energy, from ananas to something else, which will prosper both Uganda and Belgium more. So with less transportation, more sustainable regional sustainability, and asking for less will also make us more happier at individual level. Because as much as easy as we can grasp one thing, it becomes less precious for us. I mean, I remember in my childhood when I bought some shoes, that was a huge thing for me. We were all keeping, I mean, most of the people are younger than me, but you may even remember how shoes were precious for us. Now, I don't know how many shoes my daughter has now at home, and she doesn't care about the shoes. Because shoes are not precious anymore. So whatever we have, whatever we consume does not make us happy. But if they are rare, as in economy, they may even get better. So it is a mental process, and it can just be done through education and bringing more people into the discussion. I mean, what Greens have done in Europe is bringing all this discussion to the front and carrying out all the and asking people to care about it. But of course, we have a big problem to bring up all these to the table right now. And this will be the question that I will ask you and would like you to take the floor. Is that while going through crisis and people just do know about one model, consumption, so we have to have people consume so that we can produce and sell, the economy cycle may continue. And while we are having all these crises in Europe, are we really going to be able to change this outlook? Are we going to be able to use this as an opportunity to tell people that, look, we can use this as an opportunity to change the system, and we can go on a more sustainable one, and we can keep our resources clear and make ourselves more happier by consuming less? Can we come with such a motto? Or, like it's most of the time discussed, because of the economic crisis, Europe will have to give up 2020 plans, and so that it will diminish the political requests for more green Europe. The industry will win, so all the plants will be pushed out, which will bring more compatibility to the European industry, and this will give a boost to the European industry, and the old vicious circle of brown economy, if you can call it, will continue. What do you think of it? Before I give you the floor, I want to read your bio, so every one of us, because I've forgotten to read it before, every one of us will know who will answer the question. Would you let me do that so that you take the time? We have Ms Saskia Brickmont. She studied political science at the University of ULB before leaving for Montreal and then Madrid. When she returned, she decided to take her first political steps at Ecolo Saint-Gilles. She then took part in the 2007 federal elections and worked as a political advisor on European and international matters and development cooperation for Ecolo, the federal parliament. She then undertook an additional master in European studies and worked at the office of the Minister Evelyn Hutebroek, which is in charge of the fight against poverty and the homelessness sector. Since 2009, she is head of political department of Ecolo Namur, where she coordinates the work of councillors and monitors federal and international policies. In addition, she stands by her commitment as a regional secretary of Ecolo Picardy and has recently been elected as municipal councillor, and now she is a candidate to become an MEP for her party in 25th of May. Please.
Thank you. You've already said a lot, actually, about the green vision, because the green vision really starts there, from what you said. First of all, to answer the question, yes, we think crisis is a real opportunity to change the model. Of course, not in the current situation, and of course not in the current model Europe has taken. We need a fundamental change in European policies, as well economic as social and democratic policies led by Europe. The green vision, we call it the Green New Deal for Europe. Why a Green New Deal? Because it leads on three main, let's say, pillars, the economic one, the social one, and the environmental one. And you said it, the environment is at the core of the new model we want to raise, because of the limit of the resources of the planet. We know now, and that's one of the main things the Greens managed to bring to people consciousness, is that the limits of our planets are, we are arriving to those limits. I would add one or two dimensions to what you said. It's also the climate change issue, because the heavy industry, the brown industry as you called it, and all the new technologies as cars and so on, brought the gas emissions. And we know now that we have to reform our model and go out this capitalist model to reduce the emissions and to stay at the raise of the temperature of 2 degrees. To manage to do it, we need to keep the objectives that are already really low, to reduce by 20% the emissions in 2020, so it's very close to us. We're not far yet, and the Commission just decided to keep it on 20%, although we should go to 35% in 2020 to keep the temperature at 2 degrees. So you see, the challenges are quite huge, but it's possible. And we had in Belgium, I give a concrete example. We have ministers, and they carried out a Green New Deal, but called Plan Marshall 2. Green, in the French-speaking region of Belgium. And well, 5 years later, we see the green jobs through an alliance between environment and the economy and the environment. Green jobs have really been maintained in the construction, in the wind industry, and so on. So we see concrete results, even in a period of crisis, of creation of green jobs and economic activity. So energy, resources is a real new question, not new, but economic question of the 21st century, and it's also a social question. Why? Because reducing energy consumption is really important, as well as for the industry, as well as for the people, and especially the poorest people. So what we did in French-speaking part of Belgium through the Green Minister is to help people to isolate their housing, the roof, the walls, and to reduce their monthly bill energy consumption. Same for the industry, because we know energy is one of the main main issue in competitiveness for the industry, way more than wages. So a study carried by the European Commission showed industries can lower by, I think it's 17% their energy consumption and boost their competitiveness at the European level. So it's very important in our vision to show that energy and resource being resource efficient is really important as well in the social matter, as in economic and industrial matter. So that's the model we try to boost. And of course, to manage to carry it out, we, for instance, propose alternative indicators to GDP, because we think growth is not an end by itself. Growth also has to bring prosperity, well-being, quality of life of people, of citizens. So we want to work on other indicators of social well-being, of health, of access to housing, to energy, and not only the only criteria of GDP. In this model, we also try to promote, as you said it, the local production, but also local selling and consumption. This doesn't mean we won't eat bananas anymore in Belgium. That's not what we promote, of course, but it's to boost local agriculture, local jobs, and to rationalize the exchanges and the transportation cycle for our consumption and the products we buy. Same idea in the food sector, same ideas in other sectors, and we want to, for instance, to reform the PAC, agricultural model at European level, not to only put all the finance and the European funds in big productions and a normalization, I would say, a uniformization of the production, but to promote more familial and local agriculture, to preserve the diversity and the particularity of local production. That's the main ideas of our Green New Deal.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I do really appreciate that you have accepted to speak on a subject that you weren't even prepared to speak about. So thank you for your thoughts. Indeed, that trying to calculate GDP from a different angle is one of the things that I totally agree. I mean, we are really, as we are consumption, we are mentally basing everything on consumption. We also consume numbers. I mean, when the growth is at a certain level, we think that we have really that really increased our wealth or prosperity, but it doesn't really always happen as such. And changing this scheme and how people look at it is the start of everything. From this point of green economy, we are going to do a bit shift and now try to cover the second part of our discussion, which is indeed very much linked with this discussion, because in the green economy we have discussed around a certain degree of virtue to be brought on our daily lives in order to save our environment and save our next generations, so that this does not really exploit what we have. So a virtuous discussion, a conscious discussion, not to take advantages of the deficiencies of the system. That's what we have asked from our first discussion. And now, indeed, this is a very similar discussion. We are going to talk about far-right parties in Europe, which I personally see as a threat to our existence as humans on this planet. Indeed, what should be asked by ordinary people on the street is that think about the people around you, not just yourself. Don't be selfish, because being selfish on one side brings more consumption. I should consume, I don't care about the rest, brings brown economy to the hub. And if it becomes, I should do whatever I want, I don't really respect others, I don't want to see others doing anything else, will also brings on the other side fascistic thoughts, which indeed feeds all the far-right parties in Europe. And we are going to mostly now, we want to discuss on this subject. So, why this subject is vital? Because now we see as the people working around the European Union, we are really very much concerned that it is possible that the next European Parliament may be hugely dominated. I say it's domination because they say that people say that 1/3 of the MEPs may be from the far-right parties. I think this is a huge domination, because what I know from the far-right parties existent in the European Parliament in the last 7 years is that if they are there, they really make their existence visible. And if they really take 1/3 of it, I think the European Parliament will not be left to work. From the amendments that they give, from whenever they take the floors, from provocative sentences they use, so others, either socialists, Greens, Liberals, or Christian Democrats, trying to correct them, you lose all the opportunity for discussion and the meeting ends. That's what happens in the European Parliament. And now it's a big threat for our Europe, whereas the European Parliament especially had been given a huge competence to change our lives, to have its say. It can easily be dominated by far-right parties, and I think that's a trap. And we see that there are big uprisings in France, especially the second Le Pen. It's a growing power there, whereas in our northern neighbor country, Mr. Wilders. In France, they are anti-Semitist plus anti-Islamist. In Netherlands, they are not anti-Semitist, but they are anti-Islamist. In Danish People Party, they are also very much anti-Islamist. And they now have a new wording. They say that we are not fascistic. We are not really discriminatory. We just want our national existence to continue. That's why we don't want others, immigrants in the society, which, on the other in between, I should say, all the studies show that Europe needs more workers in order to sustain prosperity. And indeed, all the immigrants' families are bringing huge addition to the economical functioning of Europe, especially in these countries, France, Netherlands, and Denmark. There's a huge trend on this topic, and with all these, after 2008 economic crisis, people are more afraid than ever. So, and the first impact of getting afraid is a self-isolation from others. So, starts to see others as problems, and this brings a new political turmoil, which the far right are exploiting. While having this discussion, while I was preparing for this debate, there's a weekly paper in Belgium which is printed in Turkish, Zaman. I also had a look at its headline this week, and it was about 3 reports which had been published the week before in Belgium, on Belgium indeed. The first one was Committee of Elimination of Radical Discrimination. This is by UN. And it certainly criticizes Belgium for increasing racism in the country. And interestingly, Council of Europe, Strasbourg, had also had a report on the increasing level of discrimination in Belgium. And very interestingly, the same the organization named Muslim Rights also talks about increasing Islamophobia in Belgium and gives examples of how it's hard for women with headscarf to find jobs, and how discriminatory measures are taken in the companies in Belgium. So, on political level we have such issues, but also on the individual and social level we are seeing and hearing the consequences of increasing support to the far-right parties. So from here, the question is, are we going to be able to keep the social peace in Europe? Or all this economical turmoil will bring us, it's more or less the same in line with the previous question. Is this economical crisis going to push us to an end that we are going to start to discriminate all the new Europeans or whomever is not from us? Or are we going to be able to sustain the social Europe we are living in, both at the level of social cohabitability, but also at the level of co-workability, if I may say. Please.
Thank you. Well, we truly think that social Europe is one response to the rise of extreme right parties and populism. Of course, again, not the current social Europe and social Europe as we know it, if we may even talk about social Europe, and we don't think so. Because, well, it's really a new social but also democratic model that we need for Europe and its institutions. First of all, let me maybe make a point about extreme right parties, because we see one of the latest Eurobarometers show that 33% of the European citizens don't believe in Europe. So the level of trust in Europe and in its institutions is quite low. I think we are a lot of people to think that we have really reached a critical democratic point. Euroscepticism has gained place, and it's, again, I think it's normal in the current model shown by Europe and the different austerity measures and antisocial measures that are taken by Europe. But I think that it's totally necessary and possible to have another message and to carry another vision of what has to be a new social Europe. When we know that 25% of Europeans are at risk of poverty or social exclusion, and 27 million are unemployed, including almost out of 5 young citizens in Europe. So we know also that the most fragile end up paying the heaviest price of the crisis. So in this context, it's not really a surprise that injustice is stirring fear and anger across the continent, across Europe, and also gives legitimacy to the right-wing, easy and simplistic discourse, trying to find responsible to this crisis. Europe is responsible. Foreigners are also responsible. Unemployed people, although there's no employment for everybody, but unemployed people are responsible for the crisis. So it's an easy way to point out the responsible people and institutions of this situation. But if we share the anger, if we can share it, we deliberately choose for hope for a better and for a social Europe. Again, we think that this current situation and the social situation is just the result of 30 years of neoliberal policies and a model that has come to an end. It's funny to go back in 2007 and to a study of the European Commission itself, the European Commission, that pointed out the fact that general discontent among the workforce could explain the rise of right-wing populism and its ability to attract people with diverse and opposing interests and worldviews. In terms of policy implications, the research suggests a need for public recognition of the problems caused by social inequality and socio-economic change. It also suggests that this debate should stress the similarities rather than the differences between the national population and the foreigners. We have to see that 7 years later, the orientation taken by the European Commission is not the one that was pointed out in this study. And so, again, we think a true response to extreme right is a stronger social Europe, a cohesion and redistribution, so a real fiscal reform and a fiscal policy at the European level to end the austerity measures and competitiveness between the citizens, but also between the workers, and to end, of course, social dumping. It's not a problem of the scarcity of resources here, but more of a political will at the European level, and of course the results of the next elections will lead to another model for Europe. And again, is the crisis an opportunity? Yes, because we cannot leave the people that led to this situation, we cannot leave them in place and that they continue carrying the same politics again. This is just not possible because we're running into a But neither is succumbing to the populist, of course, and chauvinist sirens of those who preach retreating behind narrow national and regional borders, or making scapegoats, as I said, of all those who are different. We believe that no region, no country, and no part of Europe will be able to remain or become prosperous on its own. We also know that better equal societies, they perform better for almost everyone, and strong universal welfare states also achieve greater equality while preventing and eradicating poverty. The societies are more prosperous and also more resilient to the crisis. So we see that strong welfare states are more resilient. They resist better to the current situation. But again, social Europe is one part of the solution, one part of the response. Concrete propositions for a better social Europe is, for example, common minimum wage. That's a minimum. But a fundamental democratic reform of the EU is also necessary, as well as the institutions themselves. So, European Commission, for instance, or the central bank need better control mechanisms and monitoring mechanisms. We need to re-legitimate the European Parliament and the elected people, and to transform the European Parliament in a real, also controlling tool of the action of the European Commission, because so far it's not the case. It's not that the way it works. And also to increase the participation and the involvement of European citizens in EU policy making through panels, through public consultations. But so far, Europe doesn't talk to people. Europe is just a faraway instance that doesn't work concretely on our daily lives. And this is, of course, not true, because Europe takes important decisions and influences the national legislation on almost everything, on social matters, on environment, of course, on food. What we have in our boards is also decided by Europe in one sense. So that's the main vision. The vision we have about democratic reform of the European Union. And as I said it before in the first presentation, our vision for Europe is built on three pillars: a social pillar, an economic pillar, and an environmental pillar. And we are really convinced that no one of these can be really well achieved without taking into account the two other pillars. It's like a chair. It needs at least three legs to hold. Two, it's not possible to sit. One, either. So we need the three.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will start with a question and then open the floor. When it comes to this unemployment, I see this argumentation too much from my liberal friends. They say that the unemployment fee, when it is arranged at a higher level, indeed it becomes one of the sources of unemployment. So while supporting the social Europe, while I agree with you that we should really at least give people a sustainable life when they cannot find the proper means to do it for themselves. But creating a ground and a scheme and supporting them with unemployment fee, do you think that it can be a cause for more unemployment? Or from another perspective, how are you thinking of properly making a match between the people who just takes the unemployment fee and does some black jobs and even earn more than the ones who are working at a normal scheme, and on the other side continue to support a basic needs of the society? So what is the balance level for you? What's the level you think that should be properly managed?
First of all, welfare state in our vision of things is not assistance. So it's not, it's bring people to autonomy and to independence. It's not assist people and lift people in their situation. That's the first thing. In that sense, it's quite normal to have employment policies that bring people to work and to help them to get education, to get formation, to access a job. but the fact is that there are no jobs for everybody. We're not in a situation of full employment and people complying their unemployment situation. That's not the situation today. So it's impossible to sanction unemployed people when you know at the meanwhile that there's no job for them. So that's also not the vision we carry out. How to create jobs? That's also the question in the current situation. As I said, it's not the answer to all the unemployment situation, but part of it is in green jobs, construction, energy, energy efficiency, wind, water. There are a source of green job creation. We did it in the regions where we have ministers, and new jobs were created. At the same time, old industry is closing down. You know that Yesilyurt in mining and heavy metal sector, they lost a lot of benefits and had to close down. And Belgium as well lost a lot of jobs. So it's also a context of a financial and economic context that creates employment. But well, green jobs are part of the solution. Other ways of working we want to promote is, for instance, the share of work. I don't know if we can say it like that in English, but the share of work between the young and the older workers. How it works is that older workers sometimes want to reduce their work time, and it's legitimate. So people who want to make that choice reduce their work time, and young people can take that work time, and at the meanwhile, when it's possible, be coached by the older ones that are living. So that's one way also to promote employment. But at the same time also, you said it's a whole change of cultural approach and a whole change of view that we want to promote, and we also think that employment is not everything. Of course it's important to have a job, of course it's important to have an income, but we also want to value more social and societal initiatives and issues, and not only promote work for work.
That's good.
And to have another way, another vision of what prosperity is and what a good quality of life is. It's not only based on work.
Thank you. So now I open the floor for questions. I know it's hard to ask the first question. Whoever takes it is mostly we already have one.
You said that there were no jobs, but I have the impression there are jobs, but all the entry-level jobs have been replaced by something else for young people, and that maybe it should be more regulated, that an organization or enterprise should be more regulated in that way. I don't know if something is done about that, or sometimes even for internships that has 2 years of experience. So it's impossible for young people who just graduated to find a job. If organizations or enterprises ask 2 years, even for that kind of jobs, or all the entry-level jobs are being replaced. So I think that's one of maybe also the main issues here. I don't know what you're doing that, but I know that a lot of people in Master's Institute just finished their studies, trying hard to find work because of that, and that maybe there should be more regulation over these enterprises that are asking expectations that are too high. It's always a problem. If you want to gain experience, you have to start somewhere. But if nobody gives you a chance, that's that's what I wanted to ask you on that question.
And one of the other problems in that sense is the internships not paid. You make one internship and then another one, and you go like that during a year or two without being paid and without. But you have the experience after 2 years. But of course, it's a problem, and the proposition to share work between young and older generations, one of the response to this, of course not the only one, at the national level, but it's more a national proposition than a European one. It's called contrat jeune, so the youth contract, to give them access to an actual working contract to young people, part-time, so they can also part-time pursue their job research, but at least they would be paid at a minimum wage for part-time in a societal perspective. But that's in Belgium we promote that, not at European level, because in Belgium when you stop your studies you have 1 year of also transition, and you have no income during 1 year. You cannot apply to unemployment fees or so. You can just look for a job, and the problem is that most of the professionals ask for 2 years experience at least, so that's almost impossible for people getting out their studies, of course. And at European level we ask at least for the recognition of internship status, with also minimum of, it could not be called a wage, but similar, something similar.
But even for internships, because I'm also leading an office and I know that, I mean, for an intern that you want to invest, you pay something like 1,400 euros, and then you pay some 750 euros to the state as taxes, social. I think, I mean, if it is to be promoted, what should be done is to really get rid of all these extra charges and promote the paid internships, so that the companies would like to have them more, so that at least that can give the youth as a step in the professional business, and if they can make themselves heard, and so that they can sustain their jobs. Because if it's not promoted, I mean, people do try to take advantage of these unpaid interns, and that indeed also takes a part of the employment process. So if I need to employ, let's say, 10 people at my workspace, I pay 3 of them for the interns, which are low quality works mostly, and just all these 3 names always change. If I didn't have this opportunity, I would need to hire 3 more. So there's a secret unemployment created by the scheme. So I think you refer to these fiscal regulations. I think it's one of the core things that people who are really working on these fiscal regulations should also have a very good understanding and very good nose out of the social realities, and should try to promote what is really the urgency, which now youth unemployment is high, so should really try to care about letting people who are just out of the jobs study this job. So there should be some adjustments at that level that I feel, at least as running my office. We had another question there.
Yeah, it was a remark because she said that it was based on older people letting go and younger people taking the space that was left behind by the older people that leaving. But in the economy of today, since our life quality is so-called high, which makes it also, well, high to pay for, makes that older people have to stay working longer, and no older people that I know is willing to give up hours of their job, because otherwise their quality of life will get down. And since now getting off a job is so expensive too, because, well, pension-wise, it's not really going in a good way either. So I don't see any new little part-time jobs for younger people existing, first of all, and second of all, the part-time jobs for younger people are never gonna make them have the same quality of life, because they're kind of underpaid, and so there is a problem in that way of that, like, transition, because people have to live longer, people working longer, and in the end there is this kind of semi-generation that will always stay waiting.
Again, it's a proposition we promote at the national level because of the situation in Belgium, and also all the discussion we had about, well, should we or not, and we are against, should we alleviate the age of the pension? So not be in pension at 65, but later and so on. And what we propose through that idea is to maintain, of course, not a full-time wage, but more than a part-time one, paid by the state. And how to pay that is the state would have less expenses in unemployment fees for the younger people that go to work, and who would have, of course, it's part-time in this scenario, so it's not genius, but it's already a first professional experience, a concrete experience, and if they fit for a job, the enterprise might keep them and propose them a bigger contract. That's the idea, to try to promote work for the younger people.
Any other questions, remarks, comments?
There is also the problem of Romanian or Bulgarian people who are coming and they are working like slaves in Europe.
Social dumping.
Social dumping.
One of it's what I said, one of the main necessity to answer this is to have normalization, but higher harmonization. I mean, harmonization of the best dispositions and legislations in Europe in those matters. For instance, also the minimum wage. We know that there are huge differences. In Belgium, for instance, it's around 13,000, so
1,300, yeah.
1,300 euros, while in Spain and Portugal it's 600-700 euros. So very huge disparities between countries.
In Bulgaria it's 250.
And in Bulgaria 250. So you see, it's just impossible. And it's also all the discussion about the free circulation of workers inside Europe. Again, I don't know all the details about this new directive, but a decision was to harmonize the social legislation step by step. But it's also already a good point.
It will be very difficult because England didn't want foreign people. Yes. Switzerland didn't want foreign people. A lot of countries are blocking.
And that's a problem of Europe. So the problem is that national interests are still stronger than the common and the European interests.
And even Belgium didn't want Romanian or Bulgarian, Spanish people, and they didn't accept to accept
them.
It's a real problem. Then it will be very difficult when we speak about green jobs. When we speak about environment, it's like utopic things for me. I don't know why, because it's we have so many problems in the European institutions about jobs. We have so many young people who they don't have job. We have retire problem. We have a lot of problems, and how to resolve them.
Green jobs is not the big solution to everything.
Yeah,
it's
so
one way of developing a new model, a new perspective, and which is creating jobs, concrete jobs in construction, for instance. And also with it needs state investment. I mean, it's not just saying let's create green jobs. Of course, it's a whole political plan that has been set up with public investment in those sectors, It's not only the enterprises. Enterprises have been invited and supported, financially supported, to do so. And it works. But of course it's a whole political plan set up in 2009, and it's now carrying out the results 5 years later. So it's a long-term, also long-term policy. It's not from a day to another that a heavy old industry will transform and integrate the resource efficiency. It takes a while. Another sector that has been promoted and that is creating jobs is a sector of new technologies and research. Research is often one of the latest sector that gets investment while we are in a period of crisis, but it's the innovation sector. If we do not support the research sector in such times, we'll never innovate, and member states will stay aside. But I understand your point. So it's part of the solution. Another part of the solution is, of course, a more social Europe. Social Europe where social exclusion and employment and poverty is really taken in hands, which is not the case today.
Social Europe become also more and more difficult. It's not Europe that people dreamt about Europe before, but now they are going to Uganda. Portuguese people are going to Uganda, Spanish people are going to Morocco, etc. European Union, where is going European Union? It's the question.
Can I add a couple of things to the question, because she's stealing my question, I think. I mean, it seems that the issue of Green Europe is being subordinated by social Europe. I mean, it's clear. And when it comes to anything about Green Europe, I think we have middle term and short term problems. So my question is, I mean, it is clear that we are living in an era where Europe is going through with a massive economic crisis. So in such a situation, you think that the timing of Green Europe is something improper, because I think we need more funds, state and private funds, for social initiatives and projects. So it is clear that Green Europe is something which should be funded by state and by private stakeholders, so we need a huge financing. So instead of, you know, let's say taking all these funds for a grand project which is called Green Europe, which is, by the way, a project of long term, so we have certain issues which are really, let's say, hitting people on the ground and now at present. So for me, social Europe and Green Europe are two things, either or issues. Either you take the goat or you take the wolf. So so what do you think? You think should it be a priority of Europe to go for a Green Europe or for a social Europe?
Again, for me, it goes
in short term. Sorry, in short term.
You cannot. For me, it goes really together. If I take only the energy example, if you really want to impact the energy bill of people, which is very high in the monthly expenses of a family, if you really want to take this into account and to act on it, you have to integrate the question of the green economy, and not only tackle homelessness. And of course you have to tackle homelessness, but I mean, it's not only working on the current situation, but also on the causes of the situation. And energy is one example. There are other examples, of course, but I cannot imagine a social Europe without integrating sustainable development. This would just not be possible. It goes together. So sustainable development has a social dimension, and it also has an environmental dimension. When we know that we're maybe less impacted here in Europe for the moment, but climate change, environmental evolution also impacts poorer people. people have to flee their countries because of social.
Also flood. I mean, the basic thing is there are
Yeah,
huge floods.
floods. That's a concrete example in Europe and in Belgium and
In UK.
in main European countries, in UK and the tornadoes and so. And of course, poor people are the first impacted, because if they lose their houses or their jobs because of this, they don't have the sufficient resources to get back or to travel or to go somewhere else. So it's a real social issue. I cannot break that.
Can I add something to your discussion? I will start with Gülsüm's issue. I think I agree that most of the Europeans think this way. I mean, because they don't know another way of thinking. So if we are having problems we need to solve, I mean, it's usual that let's solve it with the means that we have. But in engineering, I'm sure we have engineers between us, but as a political scientist I will give the example. If you don't change the inputs in a process, you cannot change the outputs. So if you want to change the outputs, you cannot just continue to play the same game. And the de facto situation, the de facto consumption-based capitalist theory has brought us to this problem. And the problem is that we are trying still to solve the question, the problem, with what it has created. And without changing the inputs, we are expecting the output to be changed. The best example of this is the Lisbon strategy of 2000. When I first learned it in 2003 in Hamburg, while I was doing my master's study on European affairs, I was really shocked as a student, because basically the Lisbon strategy of 2000, to give you to brief you about it, was planning to change all Europe into Sweden, so that no industry is needed, so we can all have great infrastructures and invest in education, science, and high technology. So all Europe suddenly becomes the center of attraction for whomever to invest, because there is very valuable infrastructure, very valuable human capital, and so we will all live happily ever after. Indeed, it has come to implementation on European level, at national level, but I mean, it's just a dream. 4 million of Swedes may be the Sweden of the world, but 500 million of Europe cannot be the same. And if there, because it was the same mentality, without changing the scheme, without changing the mentality, without changing the input, just changing the strategy, they tried to get a different Europe, which was not possible. If that time the mentality had been in a way to promote the mental change, to change the structure of production and people's attitudes towards consumption, I'm sure there would be a much more successful Europe now. I mean, if we had the green economy strategy of that time, instead of a Lisbon strategy of promoting all the stuff that I've told you, I think that would be a proper result. So whenever you start. And if you miss the start, you miss some more years. Now that we have this crisis, we delay this 2020 plans for 10 more years, and then we again want to start, that will be another crisis. Because the inputs will not change. And I think this green economy, I cannot say the same thing about social Europe, because I have more questions about this green economy stuff. So sustainability issue and changing the mindsets of the people through education and asking them to be more virtuous people, to bring consciousness in their economic and social facilities, should be the input to change the outcome of today. If the Western world that we know now wants to sustain the prosperity, because there's a huge competition all around the world, and Europe and West should have something new to offer. And the things that we are talking about now, I mean, just discriminate this, and these are all the old games, and people do not buy it out. So we will also lose the credit that we have created as West in the world to become more democratic, open to everyone, coexistence, etc. In addition to the value that we have already lost of our ability to produce at the highest level. So I think it will become a loss. So the panic result to say no to others, let's do this, will just make us lose much more worse in a situation. So that's why I think it is just a time, and even if not we are late already, to put some more input from this perspective to the economic existence in Europe. But again, I mean, this should never be let's put more state money into this project, let's fund this project. No, it is at the individual level, it's at the education level. We have to change people. We have to invest in people, so when people changes their attitudes, the economy will suddenly change its core attitude too. Because in markets, people just follow how the producers just follow how people think about it. So if you can just invest in people, so this is, and now I've suddenly become a promoter of the green ideology.
I like that.
I see in your eyes. So just through that, we can also change the attitudes of the producers. And think about this, you know, so-called green markets. I mean, you give 3 times more to buy an apple, which is shapely different, I mean, not proper. You pay because you think that it is green, so it is ecologically correctly produced. Yeah, and it is healthier, and the awareness of the people makes them produce at that level. If you can increase this awareness, I may get along with just 1 apple. I don't need 2 of them. So I can pay twice for a good apple than 2 bad apples. Good shape but bad taste. So if we can change this, less consumption but precious consumption, so that everything becomes more precious, and all the industry may change into this, so that if you look at the high economic level, Europe again may have an advantage towards the mass production countries like China, because we cannot compete them in terms of mass production, but we can compete with them in high level, more quality, more green production. That would definitely give an extra advantage, which is the mentality behind all these green economy thing. But of course, I mean, these close threats which people feel, which is easily to be solved by especially far-right extremist parties, makes people afraid of it, and when people are afraid, they care about their sudden interest, and you lose the ground. I think that's why I think it's time to really support the green economy and to push for that. And I'm happy that the Commission is still stuck with the position, even though there are huge criticisms growing from the member states. The Commission is still there, and I hope the next President of the Commission, whomever it is, we don't know, still, can really carry out this with all these far-right commissioners he will have in his cabinet. Any other comments, questions?
But it has to go together with also a social vision of Europe, because meanwhile I couldn't agree with green jobs without prosperity and a good quality of life and a social vision of Europe. It has to go together. And of course the Commission is going ahead with this strategy. It has been a little bit put aside in this context of crisis. But the thing is that also the social and the prosperity objectives have also to involve the same way, because the strategy 2020 defined a lot of objectives in the social matters.
Yeah, definitely.
Unfortunately, they're not really put into force. They will not be realized by 2020. For instance, reducing poverty by 50% in 2020, it will not be achieved. Certainly not. So if we go to a green strategy, it also goes with a social strategy. And let me tell you that I agree with your anger that, you know, our situation is this one, and we have a lot of things to achieve to reach a social, good social Europe. So I agree with you. Know that the Greens are 58 deputies out of 766 deputies. So we're not numerous, but we're quite heavy in the way we work and we lobby and we achieve legislative work. For instance, one of the big achievements of the Greens has been on economic governance and the fact to push higher control and higher regulation on the bank system and financial system, and this goes with our model of a greener and a more social Europe.
Yeah, one question. To come back to employment, how do you see in the green strategy? How would you promote small and middle enterprises? Because that are the ones who are creating the jobs. So
their core.
Yeah, the core. That is the core
vision.
actually. So how would you then create a better climate for them?
First of all, working on the fiscal question, and this has also to be dealt with at the European level. We will not have a political and economic convergence without a fiscal system at the European level. And this fiscal system, the fiscal shift has to go to sustain small and middle-sized enterprises, that's for sure. When multinationals have more help than the small businesses that create jobs without condition. Multinational, it's not the help that is conditioned to the creation of jobs. They can just close down and go to China, for instance, and this will well, just not change anything. They will not have to reimburse the helps they got. So small and middle-sized enterprises are the core. In Belgium, it's more than 90% of the job creating and economic activity. So, as you said before, I do not agree with the way you were seeing internships because they do not have to replace actual contracts and employment. That's the difficulty between an internship and an actual job. But we have a series of propositions to lower wages for the three first people engaged in small businesses to promote the activity. That's one proposition. Also propositions to help small and middle-sized enterprises to go to resource efficiency policies in their enterprise. That's another idea. So, of course, they are the core of our vision.
Yeah, it was more an issue of hope, what you started with also in the beginning, because I think, of course, we have to think about the short-term issues and the economic issue, but if you start sustainably, then you might not solve the short-term issues and not in the long run. And I think it's really about sustainable jobs and green jobs, and not only economically but also socially. And I think also that if you have sustainable jobs and a sustainable, good, strong economy, then also with that, the other pessimistic issues will hopefully, I know this is a very idealistic version, but diminish that, because if there's a strong economy, foreigners are more welcome to also work in other countries, and the far-right parties don't have that much support of other groups. And I think also the course, we definitely have to start somewhere, and the course also that you start in the country themselves, because also there is social dumping here, but the problem is not in Belgium and it's not in Switzerland, but it's just the hope of other people to go to another country, and the problems are in other countries. And as you said, 250 euros in a month, what that's, for us, that's really kind of a joke. And so there, the borders don't have to be closed here. The borders have to be, the country has to be changed in, I think, the Eastern European countries and Bulgaria. And
It's a long-term thing, yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's important, and for that sustainability is and I know it's idealistic, but it's we have to start somewhere, and the sustainable way is, I think, the only way to really change the system.
And I think Europe can really make the difference in steering the member states in the common vision and the common projects, as well in the social as.
But it's also, like you said, an individual choice you make. Individual choices we make daily, what we buy and how much we buy shoes or whatever the example was.
Yes. Anything else to share? Okay, if not, that's, I think, time to close our discussion for today. I think it has been a very nice discussion. Thank you very much for being here. I think I may close up saying that we are in a global village, so it's not just Eastern Europe, but also all the neighboring countries. We have to really hugely take care of their well-being, which is very much close to our well-being. We cannot close our eyes to if there's a fire in our neighbor, because you know that the flames of that fire will also put our house into fire. So Europe being enclosed itself is also another danger for future of Europeans. And I think the best example is about this is the global warming plus other issues, which finds its answer in green economy, and also coexistence and cohabitation, which indeed finds its answer, hopefully, a return in the return backwards in the votes for far-right extremist parties, which will bring a shame on our respect all around the world. Which these thoughts, I'd like to close this session. Thank you all for being here, and thanks Ms Saskia Brickmont.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, you have a ceremony.
Yeah, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Chocolates!
Yeah.